The evolution of Joe Ranga is not the story of instant success. It is the story of growth, struggle, learning, and unbreakable belief. It is the journey of a person who refused to stay defined by where he started and instead chose to be shaped by where he was going. Joe Ranga began like many others, without applause, without privilege, and without guarantees. There were days of doubt, moments of failure, and seasons where progress felt invisible. But what made the difference was not talent alone, it was persistence. Every setback became a lesson. Every rejection became fuel. Every challenge became a training ground. As time passed, Joe Ranga evolved not just in skill but in mindset. He learned that discipline beats motivation, consistency beats intensity, and patience beats shortcuts. While others waited for perfect conditions, he worked with what he had. While others quit when it got hard, he leaned in and grew stronger. The evolution continued when purpose replaced ego. Joe Ranga stopped chasing validation and started chasing impact. His voice became clearer, his vision sharper, and his actions more intentional. Growth was no longer about proving others wrong, it was about becoming better than yesterday. Today, the name Joe Ranga represents resilience, self-belief, and forward movement. But the evolution is not finished. Because true evolution never ends, it continues as long as there is hunger to learn, courage to change, and faith to move forward. The evolution of Joe Ranga reminds us all of one truth. You are not defined by your past, you are shaped by your choices. The evolution of Joe Ranga begins in a place that rarely gets celebrated: humble beginnings. This phase of his journey was not marked by comfort, recognition, or easy opportunities. It was defined by limitation, uncertainty, and quiet struggle. There were no shortcuts available, no powerful connections to rely on, and no guaranteed path forward. What existed instead was an ordinary starting point that demanded extraordinary effort. In the early days, Joe Ranga stood where many people stand, full of dreams but surrounded by obstacles. Resources were limited, guidance was scarce, and progress was slow. Every step forward required effort, and every small achievement came after long hours of work that most people never saw. This stage tested patience more than talent and belief more than skill. Humble beginnings often bring self-doubt, and Joe Ranga faced it head-on. There were moments when the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be felt overwhelming. Watching others move faster or gain recognition earlier could have easily led to frustration or comparison. But instead of allowing doubt to define him, he allowed it to refine him. This phase taught Joe Ranga the value of starting small. He learned that greatness does not begin with applause, it begins with preparation. Every small task mattered. Every early failure carried a lesson. Every delay strengthened resilience. Rather than waiting for ideal conditions, he chose to work with what was available, turning limitations into training tools. Humble beginnings also shaped his work ethic. When nothing comes easily, discipline becomes a necessity. Joe Ranga learned to show up even when motivation was absent. He learned to commit when results were invisible. These early habits formed the foundation of his growth, creating strength long before success appeared. Most importantly, this stage built character. It developed humility, gratitude, and awareness. Joe Ranga understood what it meant to struggle, which later allowed him to stay grounded even as he grew. His beginnings ensured that growth would never make him forget effort, and success would never erase struggle. The early chapter of Joe Ranga's journey proves that where you start does not determine where you finish. Humble beginnings are not weaknesses, they are foundations. They create depth, resilience, and perspective that no shortcut can replace. Struggles and setbacks were not interruptions in the evolution of Joe Ranga, they were essential parts of the process. This phase of the journey was marked by repeated challenges that tested resolve, patience, and self-belief. Progress did not follow a straight line. Every step forward was often followed by resistance, delay, or failure, demanding strength beyond motivation. Joe Ranga encountered moments where effort did not immediately translate into results. Hard work sometimes went unnoticed, plans fell apart, and expectations were not met. These experiences created frustration and exhaustion, especially when outcomes did not reflect the level of dedication invested. Yet, rather than seeing these moments as proof of inability, he began to see them as signals to adapt and grow. Setbacks forced reflection. Each failure exposed gaps in knowledge, preparation, or strategy. Instead of denying mistakes, Joe Ranga chose to study them. He learned that failure is not a verdict, it is feedback. Every obstacle carried information, revealing what needed improvement and where resilience had to be strengthened. There were also emotional struggles, doubt, fear, and uncertainty. When progress slowed, the mind questioned the journey. When rejection appeared, confidence was tested. Many would have paused or quit during these moments, but Joe Ranga stayed present through the discomfort. He learned to stand firm even when clarity was missing and outcomes were uncertain. Struggles also refined patience. Growth demanded time, and setbacks reminded him that rushing leads to burnout, not breakthroughs. Instead of chasing quick fixes, he focused on steady improvement. Small adjustments made during difficult periods accumulated into long-term strength. Through repeated challenges, Joe Ranga developed resilience, the ability to continue despite difficulty. Each setback toughened his mindset, sharpening mental endurance and emotional control. Over time, struggles became less intimidating because they were familiar. What once felt overwhelming became manageable through experience. This stage of the journey transformed hardship into preparation. Struggles no longer symbolized defeat, they represented training. They strengthened discipline, sharpened awareness, and deepened commitment to growth. Every setback added another layer to the evolution, making Joe Ranga stronger, wiser, and more adaptable. The evolution of Joe Ranga clearly demonstrates that persistence outlasts talent when talent is not consistently applied. Talent may create opportunity, but persistence is what sustains progress over time. In Joe Ranga's journey, success did not come from rare ability alone. It came from the refusal to stop when the process became demanding. There were moments when others around him appeared more gifted, more confident, or more naturally skilled. Some progressed faster in the early stages, gaining attention or recognition with less effort. But Joe Ranga understood an important truth: talent without consistency fades, while persistence compounds. Instead of competing with others, he committed to competing with yesterday's version of himself. Persistence meant showing up daily, even when results were minimal or invisible. It meant continuing the work during periods of slow growth and maintaining effort during times of uncertainty. Joe Ranga learned that real progress often happens quietly, built through repetition and discipline rather than sudden breakthroughs. This commitment required mental endurance. Persistence demanded faith in the process, especially when external validation was absent. There were no guarantees that effort would pay off immediately, yet Joe Ranga continued forward. He embraced routine, structure, and steady improvement, knowing that mastery is formed through long-term dedication. Persistence also involved learning to endure boredom and frustration. Growth is not always exciting. Many stages require repetitive effort that tests patience. While others chased novelty or quick success, Joe Ranga stayed focused on refinement. Small improvements made daily slowly transformed into noticeable progress over time. Failures did not weaken persistence, they strengthened it. Each obstacle reinforced the importance of consistency. Instead of allowing setbacks to interrupt momentum, Joe Ranga used them as reminders to continue. Persistence became less about force and more about commitment, choosing to stay in motion regardless of difficulty. Through persistence, Joe Ranga built credibility with himself. Each day of effort reinforced self-trust, creating confidence rooted in action rather than assumption. Over time, persistence reshaped his identity. He was no longer defined by potential or promise, but by reliability and follow-through. This stage of the journey highlights a powerful reality. Persistence does not require extraordinary ability, it requires unwavering commitment. And through persistence, Joe Ranga transformed effort into progress and consistency into growth. A defining moment in the evolution of Joe Ranga came with a deep transformation in mindset. This shift did not happen overnight. It developed gradually through experience, failure, and self-awareness. Early on, progress was driven mainly by effort, but Joe Ranga eventually realized that effort alone is not enough without the right way of thinking. Growth required an internal change before external results could follow. This transformation involved moving away from short-term thinking and embracing a long-term vision. Instead of seeking immediate results, Joe Ranga learned to value process over outcomes. He understood that real growth is delayed and that patience is a skill, not a weakness. This shift reduced frustration and increased focus, allowing him to stay committed even when progress felt slow. Another key change was the understanding that discipline is more reliable than motivation. Motivation fluctuates, it rises and falls depending on mood and circumstance. Discipline, however, creates stability. Joe Ranga trained himself to act regardless of how he felt, building habits that sustained effort even during difficult periods. This mindset made consistency possible. Mindset transformation also meant taking full responsibility. Instead of blaming circumstances, timing, or others, Joe Ranga began to take ownership of outcomes. This sense of responsibility increased personal power. When results were lacking, he looked inward rather than outward, asking what could be improved, adjusted, or learned. Fear and self-doubt were also redefined. Rather than seeing them as signals to stop, Joe Ranga recognized them as indicators of growth. Discomfort became a sign that expansion was happening. This change allowed him to step into challenges with awareness instead of avoidance, strengthening confidence through experience. Another crucial element of this mindset shift was adaptability. Joe Ranga learned that rigidity limits growth. When strategies failed, he adjusted instead of quitting. When plans changed, he recalibrated rather than resisted. This flexibility allowed progress to continue even when conditions were uncertain. Through mindset transformation, Joe Ranga developed clarity and emotional control. Decisions became intentional rather than reactive. Actions aligned with long-term goals rather than temporary emotions. This internal evolution laid the foundation for sustainable growth and prepared him to handle greater responsibility and opportunity. Learning through challenges became a central pillar in the evolution of Joe Ranga. Instead of viewing obstacles as barriers, he gradually began to see them as classrooms. Every challenge carried a lesson, and every difficulty offered an opportunity to gain experience that no theory or preparation could provide. This shift turned hardship into a powerful source of growth. Challenges often appeared unexpectedly, disrupting plans and testing patience. Some were external, circumstances beyond control, limited resources, or sudden changes. Others were internal, fear, hesitation, or lack of clarity. Joe Ranga did not always have immediate answers, but he learned the value of staying present in difficulty rather than escaping it. Each challenge demanded problem solving. When familiar methods failed, new approaches were required. This process sharpened thinking and increased awareness. Joe Ranga learned that growth does not come from comfort, but from adaptation. The ability to analyze situations, identify weaknesses, and adjust strategies became stronger with every obstacle faced. Mistakes played an important role in this learning process. Errors were unavoidable, especially when pushing beyond comfort zones. Rather than avoiding mistakes, Joe Ranga learned to examine them carefully. Mistakes revealed gaps in understanding and highlighted areas that needed improvement. Over time, failure lost its emotional weight and became a practical tool for refinement. Challenges also strengthened emotional resilience. Facing pressure repeatedly built tolerance for stress and uncertainty. Joe Ranga learned to remain focused even when outcomes were unclear. This emotional stability allowed him to make better decisions under pressure and remain consistent during difficult periods. Another lesson from challenges was humility. Growth required accepting that there was always more to learn. Joe Ranga recognized that mastery is a continuous process. Each challenge exposed new levels of complexity, reinforcing the importance of curiosity and continuous improvement. Through learning in adversity, Joe Ranga developed confidence rooted in experience. Not the confidence of assumption, but the confidence that comes from having navigated difficulty before. Each challenge added depth to his understanding and strengthened his ability to move forward with clarity and control. A major shift in the evolution of Joe Ranga occurred when purpose began to outweigh the need for validation. In the earlier stages of the journey, recognition, approval, and external acknowledgement often felt important. Like many individuals striving to grow, there was a natural desire to be seen, heard, and appreciated. Over time, however, Joe Ranga realized that chasing validation creates dependency, while chasing purpose creates direction. This realization brought clarity. Instead of measuring progress by applause or attention, Joe Ranga began measuring it by alignment, whether actions matched values and long-term vision. Purpose provided a deeper reason to continue, especially during moments when recognition was absent or delayed. This shift made effort more meaningful and sustainable. Operating from purpose required internal honesty. Joe Ranga reflected on why he was pursuing his goals and what impact he wanted to create. This introspection reduced distraction. Decisions were no longer influenced by trends, comparisons, or expectations from others. Focus narrowed to what truly mattered, increasing efficiency and emotional balance. Choosing purpose over validation also strengthened independence. Without the constant need for approval, Joe Ranga gained freedom in decision-making. He could take necessary risks, make difficult choices, and remain committed even when misunderstood. This independence reinforced confidence rooted in conviction rather than opinion. There were moments when this path felt lonely. Moving away from validation meant accepting silence, criticism, or lack of recognition. But Joe Ranga learned that meaningful growth often happens away from attention. Purpose acted as an internal compass, providing stability when external feedback was inconsistent or unclear. This shift also improved resilience. When challenges arose, purpose reminded him why the effort mattered. It transformed pressure into responsibility and effort into contribution. Work was no longer about proving worth, it became about fulfilling intent. By prioritizing purpose, Joe Ranga refined focus, strengthened emotional control, and deepened commitment. This stage of evolution marked a move from external motivation to internal direction, creating a foundation for lasting growth driven by meaning rather than approval. Continuous self-improvement became a defining habit in the evolution of Joe Ranga. Rather than treating growth as a destination, he came to understand it as an ongoing process. This mindset removed the illusion of completion and replaced it with a commitment to constant refinement. No matter the level reached, there was always room to learn, adjust, and improve. Self-improvement began with self-awareness. Joe Ranga regularly evaluated strengths, weaknesses, and patterns of behavior. Honest reflection allowed him to identify areas that required attention without judgment or denial. This clarity prevented stagnation and encouraged intentional development rather than random effort. Learning became a daily discipline. Whether through experience, observation, or reflection, Joe Ranga remained open to new perspectives. He understood that knowledge evolves and that staying relevant requires adaptability. Instead of relying on past success, he focused on building skills that matched future challenges. Continuous improvement also required consistency. Small actions repeated daily became the foundation of long-term progress. Joe Ranga recognized that improvement does not rely on drastic change but on steady commitment. Refining habits, improving decision-making, and strengthening discipline created compound growth over time. Feedback played a crucial role. Rather than resisting criticism, Joe Ranga learned to separate emotion from information. Constructive feedback became a tool for adjustment rather than a threat to confidence. This openness accelerated development and prevented complacency. Another aspect of self-improvement was resilience against comfort. Joe Ranga avoided settling into familiarity. When routines became easy, he increased standards. When skills felt mastered, he sought new challenges. This intentional discomfort ensured continuous expansion. Through ongoing self-improvement, Joe Ranga built adaptability, awareness, and long-term consistency. Growth became embedded in identity rather than tied to outcomes, allowing progress to continue regardless of circumstances or external recognition. Ongoing evolution represents the understanding that growth is never complete. In the journey of Joe Ranga, this key point reflects a deep awareness that development does not stop at milestones, achievements, or recognition. Every phase of progress introduces new responsibilities, new challenges, and new levels of understanding that require continued adaptation. Joe Ranga learned that success is not a final state but a moving target. What works at one stage may not work at the next. This awareness encouraged continuous reassessment of goals, strategies, and personal standards. Instead of holding tightly to past methods, he remained willing to evolve, knowing that rigidity limits long-term progress. Ongoing evolution also demanded humility. No matter how much experience was gained, there was always more to learn. Joe Ranga embraced the mindset of a student, remaining open to feedback, new ideas, and changing perspectives. This openness prevented stagnation and kept growth active rather than assumed. Change often brought discomfort. Evolving meant letting go of familiar identities, habits, or routines that once felt effective. Joe Ranga understood that holding on to outdated versions of himself would restrict future growth. By allowing identity to evolve alongside goals, he maintained alignment with long-term vision. This stage required balance, honoring progress without becoming attached to it. Joe Ranga acknowledged achievements without allowing them to define limits. Each accomplishment became a reference point, not a resting place. This approach preserved hunger and curiosity while maintaining clarity. Ongoing evolution also strengthened adaptability in uncertain environments. As circumstances shifted, Joe Ranga adjusted focus and strategy without losing direction. This flexibility allowed continuity of progress even during change or disruption. Through ongoing evolution, growth became a way of being rather than a phase. It reflected commitment to learning, adapting, and refining continuously, ensuring that development remained active, relevant, and responsive to future challenges. As the evolution of Joe Ranga progressed, impact and influence began to emerge as a natural outcome of growth rather than a forced objective. Influence was not something he chased deliberately, it developed organically through consistency, authenticity, and lived experience. People began to notice not just what he achieved, but how he approached challenges, decisions, and responsibility. Impact started at a personal level. Joe Ranga's discipline, resilience, and mindset influenced those around him through example rather than instruction. actions spoke louder than words. The way he handled pressure, adapted to change, and stayed committed during uncertainty became a silent source of motivation for others observing the journey. Influence required responsibility. Joe Ranga understood that being visible meant being accountable. Decisions now carried weight beyond personal outcomes. This awareness sharpened integrity and intentionality. Choices were no longer made solely for progress, but for alignment with values that others could respect and trust. Impact also meant contribution. Joe Ranga began to recognize that growth holds greater meaning when it creates value beyond the individual. Whether through ideas, guidance, or presence, influence became a channel for shared growth. Helping others navigate challenges reinforced his own understanding and strengthened collective progress. This stage demanded emotional maturity. Influence can attract expectations, opinions, and criticism. Joe Ranga learned to remain grounded, separating responsibility from pressure. He maintained clarity by staying focused on purpose rather than popularity, ensuring that influence remained constructive rather than distracting. Impact extended beyond immediate circles. Consistency over time created credibility, and credibility built trust. People resonated with the journey because it reflected realism, struggle, effort, and progression without illusion. This authenticity deepened influence and made it sustainable. Through impact and influence, the evolution of Joe Ranga expanded outward. Growth was no longer isolated. It interacted with others, shaping perspectives and encouraging progress through example, responsibility, and consistent action. A critical element in the ongoing evolution of Joe Ranga is his vision for the future. This vision is not merely about goals or achievements. It is a guiding framework that shapes decisions, actions, and priorities. As Joe Ranga evolved, he realized that without a clear vision, progress can become scattered, energy misdirected, and purpose diluted. Vision became the compass that provided clarity and direction amid uncertainty. Joe Ranga's vision developed from reflection on his journey. He considered past experiences, the struggles, setbacks, lessons, and successes, and used them to inform the path forward. This reflection allowed him to understand not only where he wanted to go, but also the type of person he wanted to become along the way. Vision, therefore, was deeply connected to values, identity, and purpose. Having a vision required strategic thinking. Joe Ranga learned to balance long-term aspirations with short-term actionable steps. Each day, each decision, and each effort was aligned with this larger picture. Vision prevented distraction, helping him prioritize what mattered most and avoid chasing what was inconsequential or fleeting. Vision also acted as motivation during difficult times. When obstacles arose, clarity of direction made perseverance easier. Knowing the end goal and the impact he wanted to create fueled resilience and consistency. Even when immediate results were invisible, the vision anchored his commitment and reinforced faith in the process. Flexibility was a key component of this vision. Joe Ranga recognized that a vision is not a rigid blueprint but a living guide. As circumstances changed, opportunities arose, and understanding deepened, the vision could evolve without losing its core purpose. This adaptability ensured that progress continued even in a dynamic environment. Additionally, the vision extended beyond personal ambition. Joe Ranga's goals became intertwined with influence and contribution, reflecting a desire to leave a meaningful legacy. The future he envisioned was not solely about personal success but also about creating value for others, inspiring change and fostering growth in those around him. Through a clear and evolving vision, Joe Ranga was able to integrate lessons from the past, discipline in the present, and ambition for the future into a coherent path. Vision provided focus, motivation, and strategic clarity, ensuring that every step taken was purposeful and meaningful. Another defining stage in the evolution of Joe Ranga is his ability to embrace risk and uncertainty. Early in his journey, the unknown was often intimidating. Decisions carried potential failure, and stepping outside comfort zones felt unsafe. Yet over time, Joe Ranga realized that growth and meaningful progress are inseparable from risk. Without confronting uncertainty, potential remains untapped, and opportunity is delayed. Embracing risk required a shift in mindset. Joe Ranga learned to see uncertainty not as a threat but as a landscape of possibilities. Every unknown outcome held the potential for learning, adaptation, and innovation. By reframing risk as a necessary component of growth, he reduced fear and hesitation, enabling action where once there was doubt. Decision-making under uncertainty became a skill rather than a gamble. Joe Ranga developed the ability to assess potential outcomes, weigh trade-offs, and make informed choices even when complete information was unavailable. He understood that waiting for certainty often leads to stagnation, while calculated risk opens doors that were otherwise inaccessible. Challenges inherent in risk also strengthened resilience. Every bold move carried the chance of failure, but failure was no longer paralyzing. It was informative. Joe Ranga learned to fail forward, using setbacks as guidance for refinement and improvement. Each misstep added experience, confidence, and perspective, preparing him for future opportunities. Risk-taking also required courage. Moving beyond comfort zones demanded belief in his own capacity to adapt and recover. Joe Ranga developed emotional endurance, enabling him to tolerate uncertainty without being derailed by fear or doubt. This courage fueled creativity, innovation, and the ability to navigate situations others might avoid. By embracing risk, Joe Ranga cultivated independence and self-trust. He no longer relied solely on external approval or predictable outcomes. Decisions were guided by vision and principle rather than safety or convention. This approach expanded possibilities, accelerated learning, and reinforced his evolution as a resilient, adaptive leader. Through embracing risk and uncertainty, Joe Ranga transformed hesitation into action, fear into strategy, and unpredictability into growth. This willingness to step into the unknown became a defining factor in his continuous evolution. Building resilience became one of the most critical aspects of Joe Ranga's evolution. Early in his journey, he faced repeated challenges, failures, and setbacks that could have easily discouraged anyone. However, Joe Ranga discovered that resilience is not an innate trait. It is cultivated through experience, mindset, and deliberate practice. It became the foundation that allowed him to continue growing despite adversity. Resilience first developed through exposure to hardship. Each obstacle, whether external or internal, was an opportunity to practice endurance. When projects failed, opportunities were lost, or plans were disrupted, Joe Ranga learned to process disappointment without letting it define him. He began to see difficulties as temporary hurdles rather than permanent barriers. Emotional resilience was equally important. Joe Ranga experienced moments of doubt, fear, and frustration, emotions that could easily derail progress if left unchecked. He learned to acknowledge these feelings without succumbing to them, creating mental strength that enabled him to remain focused and clear-minded during challenging times. Over time, facing emotional turbulence became a source of growth rather than a weakness. Resilience also involved adaptability. Joe Ranga realized that rigid thinking leads to stagnation, especially when circumstances change unexpectedly. By staying flexible, he could adjust strategies, recalibrate goals, and respond effectively to unforeseen situations. This adaptability reinforced his ability to maintain momentum despite external pressures or setbacks. Another key aspect of building resilience was persistence combined with reflection. Resilience is not simply enduring, it is enduring intelligently. Joe Ranga developed the habit of learning from failures, extracting lessons, and using them to strengthen future approaches. Every experience, whether successful or not, became a building block for mental toughness. Physical and habitual resilience played a role as well. By maintaining routines, discipline, and consistent effort, Joe Ranga created an environment where challenges were more manageable. Habits provided stability, structure, and predictability, giving him a platform from which to face uncertainty with confidence. Through building resilience, Joe Ranga cultivated patience, strength, and endurance. He transformed adversity into opportunity, setbacks into lessons, and challenges into stepping stones. Resilience became the bedrock that supported all other aspects of his evolution, ensuring that no obstacle could permanently halt progress or diminish his drive. Mastering self-discipline became a cornerstone in the evolution of Joe Ranga. Early in his journey, motivation alone was often unreliable. There were days when energy was low, distractions were high, and the temptation to delay or quit felt strongest. Joe Ranga realized that relying solely on motivation would lead to inconsistency. True progress required a level of self-discipline that ensured action even when enthusiasm waned. Self-discipline for Joe Ranga began with structure. He created routines, schedules, and systems that minimized reliance on willpower alone. By establishing clear habits, he reduced friction between intention and action. These routines became automatic pathways for growth, allowing him to channel energy efficiently and consistently toward meaningful goals. Focus was another critical element of discipline. Joe Ranga learned to prioritize high-impact actions over low-value distractions. He resisted the temptation to chase immediate gratification or external validation, understanding that delayed rewards and strategic effort would produce greater long-term results. Self-discipline meant consistently choosing what mattered most, even when it was challenging or inconvenient. Accountability reinforced his discipline. Joe Ranga held himself to personal standards, tracking progress and measuring results. This accountability was internalized. It did not depend on recognition from others. By taking full responsibility for his actions, he cultivated reliability and a sense of ownership that strengthened both consistency and integrity. Mental toughness and self-discipline were intertwined. Discipline required resisting impulses, tolerating discomfort, and maintaining commitment during setbacks or monotony. Joe Ranga trained his mind to act deliberately, even when immediate outcomes were invisible. This mental fortitude became a tool for both personal growth and professional performance. Self-discipline also extended to learning and skill development. Joe Ranga devoted time to reading, practice, reflection, and refinement, even when progress was slow or imperceptible. By making continuous effort non-negotiable, he transformed small incremental actions into compound growth over time. Through mastering self-discipline, Joe Ranga ensured that effort became consistent, progress became reliable, and goals became achievable. Discipline transformed ambition into action, intention into habit, and vision into tangible results, solidifying a key pillar in his ongoing evolution. The journey of Joe Ranga teaches us that evolution is not a straight path. It is a continuous process of learning, adapting, and growing. From humble beginnings to building a lasting legacy, every struggle, lesson, and triumph shaped him into the person he is today. His story reminds us that success is not defined solely by achievements, but by resilience, purpose, and the positive impact we leave on the world. Joe Ranga's evolution shows that growth is a choice, one we make every day through persistence, discipline, and a commitment to becoming better than we were yesterday. And while his journey is extraordinary, the most important lesson is universal. Your past does not determine your future. Your choices, mindset, and actions do. The evolution of Joe Ranga is a call to embrace challenges, pursue continuous improvement, and lead with purpose. It is a reminder that we all have the power to evolve, create impact, and leave a legacy that inspires others long after we are gone.